Hello, welcome back to the programme. A very sad story here. This is the story of John Charlesworth, who was 78 years old. He'd been a farmer all of his working life, a keen church bell ringer. He was found dead at his farm in Silkstone, in Barnsley, in South Yorkshire, the day before Rachel Reeves' budget. Now, there's been an inquest into his suicide, and coroner Tanika Rawdon said he had caring responsibilities and was worried about the implementation of the new form of inheritance tax, which could see the family lose 50% of their farm, ultimately causing him to take his life the day before the changes were announced. His daughter Verity Charlesworth, who's 45, urged the government to rethink the inheritance tax raid, saying it's not too late to change before someone else loses their life, like my dad. Let's speak now to Gareth Wyn Jones, who is himself a farmer. Gareth, this is a really tragic story, and it's not a unique circumstance, is it? There are farmers who have farmed all their lives, who run family farms up and down the country, incredibly worried about essentially having to break up and sell off their farm, not being able to pass it down the younger generations because of this onerous policy.
Very, very sad. I know the story about this family. I've spoken to Jonathan as well. He's been very strong, and so the whole family. And hopefully there's been a little bit of closure after yesterday's inquiry. And as we can see, the coroner was very, very strong with the words about the whole situation. This government does have blood on its hands, and Keir Starmer promised in the NFU conference before he came into power he would protect family farms, and the first thing that they did was give a devastating bombshell with inheritance tax. And Rachel Reeves and the Treasury didn't do their sums. They said it was going to be a small minority who was going to be affected. We're looking at 70-80% of family farms across the UK that are going to be hit by this, and it's an industry already on its knees, squashed with government legislation, crushed by the supermarkets and their prices, and an ever changing weather system, which again adds pressure. And that's why there is a high suicide rate in the farming industry. That's why a lot of people feel low, feel depressed, feel we're not appreciated. And however you look at it, you might need a lawyer, a solicitor, a dentist, a doctor, a policeman once, twice or three times a year. You're going to need a farmer once, twice or three times a day. And governments are really forgetting about what we do for this country and what we're trying to do for this country, which is keep food affordable and keep people fed healthily. And the day they wake up, it'll be too late. There'll be nobody there to produce this food. And we're seeing supermarkets bringing in Asda, for one, bringing in beef from Uruguay now. We've got Morrison's bringing New Zealand lamb, again putting more pressure on the livestock industry and the farmers who are trying to make a living and trying to feed people affordably.
There's a very high suicide rates in farming in general. I don't think many members of the public really appreciate that because of what you're describing, the extremely small margins, the unpredictability year upon year of what your output is going to be, the strenuously long hours. What does a government need to do if it's going to listen to farmers? Because one thing I've noticed is this government are very lackadaisical about, farmers giving up their land, covering the countryside in solar panels. When you look at the approach of other countries, so China, for example, one of the West's greatest adversaries, is having a massive campaign, propaganda everywhere, encouraging people to go into farming because they want to be 100% self-sufficient in agriculture. And we're now at a rate, I think, of about 60% self-sufficient, which is similar to where we found ourselves at the outbreak of the Second World War, which what you see when there's disruption in supply chains is you can plunge your country into devastation pretty quickly. We had to have dig for victory. We had to have rationing going all the way through into the 1950s as a result of this. And I just think it is mental. The first thing a country should be looking at doing is making sure it can produce its own energy and feed itself, because that actually directly affects whether people can live or die. And yet this government seems to be happy to just ride roughshod over farming, an industry that's already under great pressures and great strain. What is it that a government, if it was in listening mode, if it said, right, we actually need to boost the agricultural sector, not keep penalising it, what should they be doing?
Well, number one would be scrap inheritance tax. I'll just go back because I agree on the majority of your points. One thing I'm going to go back on, because I think it's really important, is, you know, I've got a big social media following, and I have to say the general public have been very, very supportive about this. And we cannot forget, you know, they're the consumers, they're the customers that we're trying to, and they are being supportive, and they are beginning to turn their back on this government and the previous governments as well, you know. And this is important. You know, we've got to start thinking about building a better Britain on our bellies. So we start with food security, and you're 100% right. You know, we've seen food shortages, we've seen rations, and we are sleepwalking into them again. We are sleepwalking into them again. And there is going to be a global food shortages. You know, we've got a growing population in the world. So we need to make sure there's enough food being produced in the UK to be self-sufficient. And what is government doing? Taking away them powers from us. You know, giving companies into Wales, for instance, to buy land so they can offset their carbon by growing trees. Solar panels then, solar farms. Look, I'm not against trees, I'm not against solar panels. Solar panels on roofs, solar panels on land that's not productive for food production. We're a small island with a growing population. For God's sake, if we're not going to be protecting that land, every inch we lose, we're going to have less room to grow food. And however you look at it, we're flipping good at what we do. We're very, very good at what we do. We've had, well, my family's had 375 years of experience on the same land doing what we do.
Right.
So we have to make sure we protect these family farms, as in working farms, from this inheritance tax, making sure we keep people fed affordably, healthily and sustainably.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the highest standards in agriculture in the world as well. Brilliant pastoral, traditional ways of farming, not mass intensive, chuck them all in some giant aircraft hangar and feed them weird stuff. Let's speak now to Norman in Leicestershire. Hello, Norman. Good afternoon.
Hello, Julia. How are you doing?
Oh, it's Alex, but never mind. I'm very well. I don't mind being called Julia. She's a great woman. That's all right.
Sorry. I've just been listening to the and as I said to the guy that answered the phone, in the First World War, this country could not feed itself. The Second World War, it was even worse. What we have now is this government, if you can call it that, seem intent on destroying the farming industry in this country, and we will live to regret it in years to come. We'll live to regret it.
Well, that's exactly what I say, because, you know, people sort of think, well, it's fine, you know, we can import all this stuff from outside. That's OK. We live in a globalised world. It's really easy flying in green beans from Kenya or oranges from wherever it may be, Israel. That's dead simple. Well, actually, it's not, because no one predicts when war's going to come. We all know that some of that we saw, actually, the outbreak of the invasion of Ukraine, exactly what Russia was doing, preventing grain supplies, fertiliser and cooking oils coming out of the country, which plunged the globe, the entire world, into inflation. African countries, and this wasn't really reported on, but African countries single-handedly depended on that fertiliser and that grain to try and avoid mass starvation. And Russia was able to wargame it, which is why they want to take over ports like Odessa. It's why they took over Crimea, because they want to control those maritime routes. Same with the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. If we allow farming to just be decimated, no one knows when there's going to be disruption to a supply chain. We saw it with COVID as well. And if you can't feed yourself and your country, if you can't make sure the lights stay turned on and constantly rely on the basics for living on other countries, you could find yourself very rapidly wanting. It is reckless, it is feckless, it is dangerous. Norman, thank you ever so much. Thank you as well to Gareth Wyn Jones there, talking about this tragedy that's happened within the farming community.